In this episode of the Wild Party Podcast, we welcome the powerhouse trailblazer, Stephanie Downs. Stephanie is the CEO and co founder of Uncaged Innovations, the world's first biomaterial company creating leather alternatives from grains at scale. Stephanie shares her journey, exploring how her passion for ethical, vegan, and sustainable business practices led her from digital marketing to founding a groundbreaking company. We dive deep into the leather alternative industry, discussing its challenges, the environmental impact, and the importance of innovation in the fashion and automotive sectors. Plus, how she played a key role in encouraging Tesla's shift to an animal-free leather car interiors. Stephanie offers valuable advice on how money can drive positive change, the power of partnerships, and why integrating your values into your business is the key to success. Let's get this party started. Welcome to the Wild Party Podcast, where we celebrate the visionaries behind vegan, ethical, and sustainable business. In each episode, we'll dive deep into their journeys, uncovering the why behind their mission-driven business. I'm your host, Stephanie Lahart. Tune in with me for passionate discussions about overcoming challenges, innovative marketing strategies, and the power of using business as a force for good. So whether you're an entrepreneur seeking guidance or a conscious consumer wanting to support impactful brands, join us as we explore the stories behind the businesses that are changing the world for the better. Let's get the party started. Welcome to the show, Stephanie. I am so excited to talk to you.
Hi, Stephanie. I'm honored to be here.
So we did already say it is officially the Stephanie Show. And for
Exactly.
those of you that are out there saying we don't get why Stephanies are so excited about their name, I don't really know what
I
it is.
don't know. Yeah, I
But
don't know many.
when you meet another Stephanie, aren't you just like Stephanie? It's like this club.
Right, right. We were all born, I think, during a kind of certain time, or at least a small span. And yeah, no, I don't know too many.
Yeah. And when I meet someone like you that is right in the sector that I have so much passion for, I'm like, oh, this girl is definitely my sister from another mister. Because Stephanie, you have had such a diverse and impactful entrepreneurial journey from digital marketing to plant-based meats and now biomaterials. I mean, let's just start with the big question. What has driven you to pursue such varied industries? And then how did all these experiences kind of shape your approach to founding this new Uncaged Innovations? I know it's a big question. I
Yeah,
kind of just want to dive into you. I mean, you started in the digital marketing sphere, right? You were a marketer
yeah,
to begin with,
yep.
correct?
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit of the journey and feel free, I don't want to ramble on too long, but it's a long one. So if you feel free to jump in with any questions. But yeah, so for me, the big picture journey is my background is all in business, and I graduated college in the mid 90s with a marketing degree, and then I went to work for a small software startup. And so I had the pleasure of kind of experiencing the dot-com craze and rise in the late 90s. And so I started my first company in 1999, which was a digital marketing company, as you mentioned, which is not interesting today. But in 1999, my biggest competitor was the Yellow Pages, and so it was I had to explain to people what that was. And right around that time, actually, I will say that was where the journey that ultimately long term led to Uncaged began, because I got a couple years into the company, it was doing really well, and I kind of had accomplished everything that, as a small town girl from the Midwest, I had kind of hoped, financially and just accomplishment wise. I had my own company, lots of things were really lined up, but I just really wasn't very happy, and I just felt like something was missing, and it was definitely that money doesn't buy happiness kind of feeling. And so then I started volunteering at an animal shelter, and that was kind of the beginning of it. I volunteered at the animal shelter, and just wanted to go do that. And next thing I know, I'm on the board of directors. I'm running the annual fundraiser, and I was kind of hooked at this feeling of giving back. And so then I started taking steps to build my company so that I could step away from it And in 2008, I actually was able to step away from the company, and I started helping out animal welfare groups, doing corporate negotiations, working with companies, like kind of doing corporate outreach to work with companies to talk to them and educate them on alternatives, whether it was more humane slaughter systems or just, faux furs, different types of things. And that's where I really kind of became interested in this concept of alternatives. So then after selling my first company, I decided to shift into the social enterprise. And that's how I then started the plant-based meat company. But I'd always kind of kept my eye on this space as far as what was happening in automotive and home goods and things with leather alternatives. And so after selling my ownership on the company in India, I decided to turn my attention back to this. So it was a little bit of started on the for-profit side, did some things on the nonprofit world, and then kind of settled in the middle.
Well, hearing you describe your journey like that, I am convinced we are separated at birth because we have had so many similar experiences. I myself, okay, so I'm still in digital marketing, obviously.
Okay.
But again, I started in around 1999, like you.
Right.
And, the journey kind of has weaved back and forth. I did web development, I did this and that. And for me, my entire life, I say my entire life because at 16, I turned vegetarian. And now I've been a
Nice.
vegan for the last 8 years, turning
Okay.
completely vegan in 2016. But throughout that whole time, I think my mission and my values didn't really drive my work like it does now. It was
Mhm.
always like, I'm this
Right.
person, but then in business, I show up a different way. So I
Mhm.
love that you were able to integrate those values and what you saw going on in the animal, we'll say farming industry so early on. Cause honestly, it took me a little bit longer to catch up and be like,
Yeah.
oh, I should focus my whole business around this. Hence why we launched the Wild Party podcast. So
Nice.
with that said, regarding like what you've done now, with everything in, well, first of all, let's just say, so Uncaged Innovations, you found it with Dr. Wang, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So we founded Uncaged Innovations almost 4 years ago. And, Dr. Wang is a biomedical engineer, and she did her PhD at Georgia Tech, and then it went on to work at Johns Hopkins, where she invented a way to make human corneal implants out of biomaterials. So she's definitely the brains behind our operation, and why her work is very important to and transitions into what we're doing here is that skin is made of the same ingredient. It's made of collagen, which is also what your corneas are made of. And so she was very familiar with how collagen functioned and how to get it to behave in specific ways.
That's fascinating. And that makes so much more sense because now, as we talk more about these, we'll call them, next gen materials
Yeah.
and future generation, it is interesting now. I find it weird almost that people are so focused on the fact that we need a substitute for leather, honestly. Like, why can't we have something else and call it something else? Because as
Right.
I call myself the conscious consumer, I'm always a little thrown when I read a product description and it says leather, because then I'm like, are we talking animal leather now? Or,
Right.
I almost feel like I wish we had picked a different word moving forward. But when I hear about companies like you that are like, you know what? People still want this product that they're considering
Yeah.
superior and almost a luxury item. And we're going to make it almost, as close to an animal leather as possible, but it's not animal leather. So it's,
Yeah.
not cruel, it's sustainable. So on that regards, I'm really on board. I'm like, okay, I can get on board with that. But can you see like how it's almost like, oh, it's so confusing then for the consumer. Is it leather? Is it not leather? So let me ask you then, how do you address that, not only from the product side, but in your marketing message? Because
Mhm.
if you're calling it a leather alternative, how do you make it clear to the consumer that no, this is not animal based?
Yeah, and there's lots of different ways that you can look at that, and lots of different debating that goes on around it. But I think the concept around why we want to create a alternative goes to the same things that we saw in the food space, right? Like consumers are very set in their ways. People have certain, visually, even though animal leather, that's why I joke that leather is really just a made up word, because if they described it, it's embalmed skin coated in plastic, right? So, so it's just like they didn't want to call it that, so they made up this new word. And So it's, but at the same time, over literally like a couple thousand years, consumers have come to accept that that's something that they think is good. And so I think it's the same with like chicken and beef and different things, cheeses, that you want to meet the consumers where they're at. But what I think is very unique about our situation is that the entire leather category is about $150 billion industry. About 85 billion of that is animal leather, and about 65 billion is synthetic leather. Why that's important is that if you look at it, the synthetic leather or the vegan leather industry has already captured 40% of the market, as opposed to what you might look at like plant-based meats are, less than 1% of the market, right? So we've already established that consumers are okay with an alternative, right? Like they're not that emotionally attached to it, which is where I felt that there was a really good business opportunity. Because now what's becoming a challenge for the planet and then therefore for the fashion and automotive industries is the synthetic leathers are made of plastic. And so, fashion, these brands are now a little bit backed into a quarter. So if you're just looking at it from, well, an environmental or an animal welfare standpoint, the synthetic leathers are undeniably still better, no matter what people want to say, because almost all leather is coated in plastic and it's treated with chemicals that are bad for the planet. But we also don't want to be putting, plastic out. So yeah, so I think that it's interesting. We need to meet the consumers where they're at. We need to bring them this thing. But I do think, do we want to talk about it's better than, the current incumbents, and how do we, and I don't think right now as an industry, we're still saying things like next gen leather, sustainable leather. I don't think the industry has really figured that out yet.
Yeah, that's very true, because I do hear so many new terminologies like that, next gen and
Yeah,
sustainable. And again, because we keep going back to the word leather, I myself as a consumer was always like, is it leather? Like how leather is
yeah,
it? Even insofar as like I will frequently see on products, let's say like running shoes or tennis shoes,
yeah.
where you'll look at it and it doesn't outright say leather, but then you read the description and it'll say leather embellishment. And it'll be real
Yeah,
small in the description. So you're like, okay, wait a minute. Is that actual animal leather, or you're just calling it leather? So it gets so confusing. And like I said, just me as a consumer, I'm always just like, I don't really know what's happening sometimes. And
yeah.
I'm very much into, not consuming any animal products. So for me, and I assume for yourself, you're a label reader, girl, is what I'm guessing. You stand there in the grocery
Yeah,
aisle
I'm
like
like,
me,
yeah,
like,
some of them. I don't always go all the way to the end, but yeah, actually, interesting side note on that leather embellishment terminology is there's actually a challenge in some groups. I actually have some calls coming up. We're trying to do some things to work on it. But if a lot of times fashion brands will put a small, especially in footwear, will put a small amount of animal hide on it, because that lowers the duty tax by 50%. On the product as it's coming into the United States. So, there's different duty taxes and things that were put in place. I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but when the US was a major tanning hub. And so to help protect the US tanning industry from the synthetics that were starting to come out of Asia. But now the US has hardly any tanneries, less than 100 tanneries are left in the United States. So it's a very small industry here now, but those tariffs remain in place. That makes, like for example, somebody like Stella McCartney ships in a handbag, it's going to cost twice as much for her on duty tax than it will if it's an animal handbag or even has a little bit of animal leather on it. Yeah, it's crazy.
You are blowing my mind, because you just explained so much of the world to me, because I really couldn't understand why these products keep coming out and they have this
Yeah,
tiny leather patch, and I'm like, what is that? That makes no sense. And you just explained
yeah,
it. It's a tax reason,
yeah,
which
yeah,
is horrifying, but also simplifies everything in my mind. I'm like, oh, I get it. Okay, so we have to change laws and taxes. Okay, let's
yeah.
see, where are my
No
vegan
small challenge.
politicians that I need to get to at this point?
Exactly.
So I would guess then that we could see that as one of the biggest hurdles then for what you're doing, is the fact that sometimes it's just cheaper to throw an animal-based product
Yeah.
on something. So your products then, so your Uncaged Innovations, you're creating the material then. What kind of products are you seeing the best use for what you are creating?
Yeah, I mean, I think that ultimately there's going to be a lot of different applications, but a lot of times it's about bringing, the best first product to market, or where's the best entry points. Um, and so for us, the starting point will be accessories. What's a category that's called small leather goods. So that's things like wallets, watch bands, handbags. And so that will be our entry point, and then evolving from there into other categories like footwear and automotive. Are we're seeing, I mean, the amount of inbound interest we have is insane. Like we can't, it's hard to even keep up with what's coming in. So we haven't, but we're just trying to be strategic about. We've had people contact us to make basketballs, to do interior jets, to do, and each different category of material, like whether it's what the durability and specifications you need to meet for a watch band is different than a shoe and different than than a car seat and so on. It's all different. Or some of them need to be anti-flammable. Some of them need to have better UV protection. So there's a lot of, it's not just one thing. And that's something we had to really think about as we were developing this, is it has to be extremely customizable. It has to be able to meet all kinds of different specifications. I thought food was complicated. But I mean, you look at something like this and you're like, it looks good, feels good, must be all right. It's not even close. So like there's like 30 different, 40 different tests you have to go through, and you fix one and they break another. And it was quite complicated to get to where we're at.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense the way you laid it out. Obviously, basketball needs a different density and resistance and
Yeah.
durability than a handbag kind of thing. And with that, I will say, I've seen some extremely high quality products out there and some very low quality products. So I
Yeah.
think we're always straddling that very, fine line between, does it make sense to do it like this? Because is the product just going to become garbage quicker than it would have
Yeah.
been? And I do hear, and you might have already heard this argument sometimes from, let's say, on the pro animal usage side, where they're like,
Mm,
look, the products that are being made from these other materials are just, really not high quality. They break down,
mm,
they become garbage very quickly, and it just fills landfills quicker. Whereas, something like a leather product, a leather shoe, might have a longer, lifespan. So really, what's the way in? But
yeah.
what we are also always, acknowledging is no matter what we create, there is always some kind of environmental footprint for it. But I
Right.
really think it goes
Yeah.
back to, again, what are our personal values? So for me, there is absolutely nothing that would ever convince me that, killing an animal is going to somehow be better for the planet, because
Yeah.
I'm like fully lifestyle vegan, and I'm assuming you are at this point
Yes.
too. So
Yes.
nothing's ever going to say to me, Stephanie, look, we know you don't want to buy a leather product, but in the end it becomes this. I'm like, no, not amount of suffering is worth that for me. But for something like, Uncaged Innovations, do you find that has been one of your biggest hurdles, is that you're hearing from these sustainability sectors that are like, doesn't actually help the planet? Because
Yeah.
they want to get you away from the cruelty side. So how much, I think, of the cruelty message do you weave into your outreach? Or is it really not about that, because you're now having companies come to you and outright say, no, we need your material? Like, do you really need to reach out to companies and be like, hey, use this material? Or are you getting so much, I think, inbound traffic that you're already set as far as you have enough customers coming in?
Yeah. I mean, we definitely have plenty of inbound traffic. So we've not needed to do any outbound marketing. There's a conference that we do called the Future Fabrics Expo, which we do exhibit there, but otherwise we've not done any outbound marketing. So yeah, we have companies coming to us. I mean, it's interesting, the different things that you get from different audiences. So you were talking about the sustainability people, and then of course there's the leather industry and so on. I mean, anytime you're coming in and you're creating, we saw the same thing in food. I mean, anytime you're coming in and you're disrupting an industry, you're going to get some pushback from people. But for me, fortunately, I've been through these types of things before. Even though in 1999, I did not consider, really, at that time we didn't use the term disruption. That wasn't a thing yet. But I regularly would have disagreements with people who would tell me that the internet would never replace the yellow pages. Like, they were just so proud of their yellow pages ads, or I'd talk to yellow pages sales reps. And so when I think, anytime I have a discussion with somebody now that says, well, we want to use some of this, but we're never going to stop using leather, like, I just laugh inside, because I know in 20 years from now that they're going to eat those words. So like, it's just, there's so many things that we can look back in history. And so, talking about the sustainability people and stuff, I think a lot of people don't necessarily have most people that are in sustainability or within some of the brands, have never built an innovation, right? And so if you really think about the way innovations happen, rarely does somebody just get it right out of the gate, right? So things evolve. I mean, every innovator in this space, even if their durability isn't there, or if they have more plastic content than is good, or any plastic content, they're not stopping there. They're evolving. And I mean, let's think about to the 90s. The first cell phones that were created were so big that they required their own bag to carry them in, right? And so, what if all the telecom people and everybody else then had come out with all these all these campaigns dogging on that, saying, this is so bad, it's so heavy, who would want to carry that? Then we might not have this, right? I mean, you have to start somewhere, and it's never going to be perfect. It's going to be too expensive. It's going to have challenges, but you have to start somewhere. And so it's just so strange to me when people like rip on these things that are just getting off the ground. So
Yeah, and that's very true. And I love the cell phone analogy you just made there
yeah,
because it's true. I mean, you can look at any movie in the 80s and it was like the high-powered cool people were literally carrying around like an additional purse that was the cell
right,
phone thing. And it's true. It's like when you introduce a new idea, people immediately want to discount it and say it will
right.
absolutely not work. But now we've seen the rise of
Oh,
the industry and the conscious consumer, and people want non-leather products, and we want food products that are not made from animal cruelty
yeah.
or whatever you want to go with that. But I really found it interesting because I did read that you actually played a pivotal role in Tesla's adoption of
I
animal-free
did. Yeah.
leather interiors. Please tell me how all that happened, because I really feel like, for as crazy as Elon Musk can be, I'm glad that, I get into a
Yeah.
Tesla and I don't have to worry about it being a leather interior.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think he seems to have changed a lot since all that happened. But yeah, so I at the time I was doing some consulting work for PETA, the animal rights group, which that was the type of group that I did corporate outreach work for, and we had been trying. A lot of people don't even understand. Like PETA does a lot of behind the scenes work. Like people only know what they see on the streets, but there's a lot of strategic work that happens in the background, and I was very proud to be a part of that. And so, had been reaching out and trying to write Tesla, and, just asking for a meeting to discuss the options were out there and to educate them on the challenges with leather. That was the kind of work that we did. And we were just having a real challenge getting them to reply. And so then I went to Tesla's shareholder meeting and got up and asked Elon in front of everybody. It's a long story, but there was actually some people who got up and gave presentations under what are called shareholder resolutions about the challenges of animal leather, both from an environmental and a cruelty standpoint. And so they kind of did those things. They were shareholders that we prepped and got ready to go. And then I got up during the Q&A session and asked him about meeting with Tesla to just discuss the alternatives with them that we just wanted to educate them on. And that was the beginning of it. And he had me. So he's one of the few CEOs, I don't know if he's still doing it, but at that time that actually fielded questions. Most of them do everything they can to escape them. But he actually fields and answers to the actual questions. So that was the beginning. And then we started meeting with them and taking them and introducing them to innovators and things like that. So it was a very exciting project.
So you actually attended that meeting with the intention of bringing this up to get
Oh
it
yeah.
into Tesla. Okay, so you were clear. And were you an actual stockholder at that time?
So I'm not, but lots of animal welfare groups buy stock in companies so that they can attend their holder meetings. So I was there, PETA on PETA's behalf. So they flew me out to California to attend the meeting and speak on their behalf.
Yeah, so PETA, I'll tell you, I've been a longtime supporter and member of PETA since I was
Nice,
16. They were my entryway into vegetarianism.
nice.
Uh,
Yeah,
and
mine
and
too. Mine
yeah,
too.
and I had a friend who was already aware of them, and she showed me some horrifying magazines in the 80s where,
Mm,
my poor little 16-year-old mind was exploding, thinking people know this happens. How is this
I
allowed?
know. I
But
know.
now living in LA, I actually live very close to the headquarters. So I've been to several of their meetings and their community outreaches. And when you're speaking about they do a lot of behind the scenes stuff, I was amazed. I was like, oh my God, they're actually hiring scientists and doing
Yeah,
this testing themselves to be able to roll this stuff out, specifically, like, in the beauty industry, to say there's a
yeah,
different way of doing this. And they're
yeah,
adopting it because they don't have to figure any of this out. And I think the same way, you're seeing all of these advantages and possible usage for these materials that you're creating. It's the same way. It's like you fix the industry from within, right?
yeah. Well, that's what
Yeah.
we started because I started helping them out in 2008. And one of the first things we did was start contacting, at the time, like Pinatex was the pineapple leather company was getting started, and some of the mushroom leathers. And we used to contact them, get samples of the material, and then we would take it and show them to brands and introduce them and try to just bridge that gap. So instead of, and that was the work that I really loved about it is instead of just going in and saying stop doing something, we went in, educated them on why, from a business standpoint, why the challenges, what the challenges were, and then also, hey, here's some solutions. And like I worked on another big project that I got the first humane slaughter system installed in the United States, with a company called Bell and Evans. It's the largest chicken producer for Whole Foods in the country. And that was a lot of work. That was actually a 5-year project, of working on that. So it was, but we did that kind of work. Most people wouldn't think that PETA would have anything to do with slaughter systems, but I mean, at this point we've saved billions of animals from a really horrible death. So they're much more reasonable and do a lot more strategic behind the scene things than people realize, which I enjoyed doing the work.
Yeah, no, and I totally understand that. Like I said, I'm a big change from within person.
Yeah,
When I hear people complaining about something, I said, join the organization, get a seat at the table, change from within. Because, I firmly
yeah,
believe like people who just stand there screaming on the street, for as much as protesting gives you the visuals, the real
yeah,
change comes from the people that are making decisions. So I'm always like
yeah.
subversive, get in there, be the person making the decision about what's happened. So I love that you see that as well, because that's really how, things change. So then let me ask you this, and what do you consider your biggest success so far within
Mm.
Uncaged Innovations? And what are the key
Mm.
factors that contributed? What do you think really has been, what kind of needles I think have you guys moved?
Yeah. Well, we'll have some big announcements coming out in the by the first of this year that I can't talk about yet. But I think the thing that I'm the most proud of that we've done is that within a less than a 4-year time frame, and utilizing less than $2 million. Now we've raised 8 million. We recently closed another investor raise, but by just budgetary wise, within $2 million, and within about 3.5 years, we went from an idea on paper to full scale production. We can now produce entire rolls of the material that are like 1.5 meters wide and 2,000 meters long, which is plenty. That's plenty big enough for any industry, automotive or anything. Whereas, and I think, and the reason that I'm proud of that is that there's other innovations out there that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars and that still aren't in the marketplace, or that are still struggling and have been around for over a decade. And so I'm very proud, I think, of that. And I really attribute that to, it's not just my credit. Jacqueline is amazing, our CTO. She, with a small team, she's just very strategic as a scientist on how she approaches things, and had some really brilliant ideas going into this. We haven't had a chance to talk about it, but this is our material, by the way. Should try and show it here on camera. And we can make it in all kinds of bright and light colors. And our material is made of grains. So we figured out a way to use different types of plant proteins to replicate the collagen protein that's in animal leather. And so yeah, I think just the fact that we got this innovation to market utilizing a wise amount of budget and at a rapid pace is what I'm most proud of.
That's awesome. So I'm glad that you brought up the funding. I did read that, and congratulations on getting that round
Thank
of
you.
funding. That's awesome. So let me, just to let you know, we do have a lot of startups out there that are listening to
Okay.
this, new entrepreneurs. And when they hear things like, oh, they got $8 million in funding, they kind of tune out because they're like, wouldn't even know how to access that. So just
Right.
tell me, without revealing maybe like your secret sauce or your inside connection,
Oh no, happy to share.
how does a company or a person with an idea find funding? Like if you
Mm.
were talking to a brand new entrepreneur out there that had an idea for like a vegan product or business, what would you suggest to them if they were like, I want to do this business, I don't have any startup money, where do I go to get investors? What does that look like?
Yeah, and I mean it changes according to what are the market conditions, right? So right now the last 2 years have been much more difficult to raise than it was, 4 years ago. Just because there's, just things that are happening with interest rates and things that make the venture capital world change. But I think the main thing is first they have to have a really solid plan. So nobody's going to fund somebody who hasn't thought it all through. It can't just be like, oh, I've got this idea. Like you have to assess the market, you have to assess the competitors, the strengths, the weaknesses. You need to put somewhat of a team together, or at least even if they're not co-founders, you need to have resources that are going to be working on things. Somebody doesn't, and that's why, like, for example, somebody like Jacun, a scientist, like nobody was just going to give me money, like, without a scientist to make this happen, and vice versa. So, you need to have the like some what of a well-rounded team. It does help to have experience. I mean, a lot of people will invest in young founders, but it does help to have some experience under your belt. But the most important thing is a plan, a really, really thorough investigated plan of how are you going to make money, how are you going to scale this, and so on. So that's one. And then I would also just recommend, reading a lot. So, I mean, my first, as far as reading about working with investors, and watch lots of YouTubes. Like there's a very famous startup called, or sorry, incubator called Y Combinator, and they have lots of like online videos and things. I think they have like a whole, I haven't watched them, but a friend of mine was, like a whole training session. So just really, really do your research and understand what you're getting into, know the terminology and stuff. So that would be what I would say is the starting point.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I am familiar with Y Combinator, and
Yeah,
it's been such a great launch pad for so many companies, and getting, people up to speed with what they need to do. Because like I said, sometimes it can feel daunting, like I want to do this, but I wouldn't know how to start. So I
right.
think that reaching out is very helpful. So with that said, what do your collaborations and partnerships look like? Are there specific brands or companies that you look to collaborate and partner with that you feel like, you could help them, they can help you? What does that happen?
Yeah, sure. So I can't talk publicly about too many of them yet because as soon as you start engaging with these brands, they're like NDA. But I can talk about, like, we are working with all of the world's largest fashion houses. And we're, everything from accessories, luxury to footwear. So we've got about 300 different brands that we're working with behind the scenes, and everything from small brands to large brands. We actually, next month, we will be launching our material to the market, and announcing our first brand partnerships. So that'll be coming in late October. And then I can also talk about automotive. So Jaguar Land Rover has invested in us twice. And we'll be, we're working with them to move toward doing car interiors. And then we're also working with various other automotive companies that I can't talk about yet.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I really believe that partnership and collaboration is the key to so many businesses. And I feel
Yeah,
a lot of times, especially like I said, in the entrepreneurial journey, people are afraid at first. They're like, I don't want to ask for
yeah.
help because then it makes it seem like I don't know what I'm doing. But different on your level, of course. You guys definitely had a real plan, a real team in place. But for you personally, I know you personally also really believe in investing in people, let's say. And you've done
Mm,
mentoring, correct? I believe there was a
yes.
company called the ProVeg Incubator.
Yep. I've been a mentor there for years, and also Humane. It was a HSI India one of Humane Entrepreneurship Initiative, I think. So yeah, so I've done that. I've had, yeah. So I was 27 when I started my first company, and yeah, over the years I've had a lot of people come to me.
Yeah, so and I'm sure they're always like, I don't really know what to do. What should I? And it's so funny, because we're always like, just start, right? Just
Right.
start somewhere. But for
Well, and
you,
that's
like, let's talk about
yeah.
personal then. You've had such a varied and impactful career. How do you personally stay motivated and continue pushing the boundaries in your field? Because I know, like, if people are watching the video right now, you're going to look at Stephanie and be like, she's got it all together. This girl, no problem. Tell me how you get motivated on a Monday morning,
Oh,
Stephanie, to keep going when you've heard maybe a week of no's the week before.
right, right. Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing for me, I've always been a worker. So I've just always loved, quite honestly, I also really enjoy making money. Like I love business. Like I love the art of the deal. I love strategic plans. I just love doing it. So it's very easy for me. I think I started working when I was 12 years old. I knew the power of money at a very young age. If you had, to me, money was freedom. Like you could do what you wanted, you could buy what you wanted. And yeah, so I don't want to say that it's hard to motivate, or I don't really have any specific tricks. Because I just always loved it. And especially in this situation, I will say with my first business, I was almost kind of looking for a way out, which is what I think I kind of did when in doing helping with animal welfare groups, because I was just making money, right? So I kind of felt like what I do for a living is I make rich people richer. That's what it kind of felt like. And I didn't find it fulfilling. So, I was filling it by doing charitable stuff and then ultimately, but like in this situation where I've married, business with giving back, it's just, I don't have to work too hard at getting ambitious or getting motivated. But I will say there are definitely times that you're just like, oh, I can't do it, just because it can be entrepreneur life. People really, really need to understand this, and this is very, very important. 90% of businesses fail. And I think a reason a lot of them fail is because people don't quite grasp what they're getting into. This is a lifestyle. This isn't a job. You're not going to be your own boss. Now you're going to have lots of bosses. Every customer, every investor is your boss, right? You don't get to go on a real vacation, So, I always say to people, listen, think about the roughest day you've had. Now multiply it by 10, and that's what every day of your life will be like for at least the first 2 years. Are you ready for that? so
I love the
so
honesty because it's absolutely true. And,
yeah,
many times people look at entrepreneurs and think, oh, they're the
right,
lazy people. And it's like, no, they're the crazy people because we
right. Yeah,
want to create something. And I include myself in this. I consider myself a creator like you. I see stuff and I want to create it and I want to bring it to the world and I get excited about it. So
yeah.
let me just ask you then, what would be the one piece of advice you would give your younger self when you were starting out as an entrepreneur? Would that be
Hmm,
it? Just hold on tight?
that's interesting. What I think that well, so I'm gonna share something that might be a little controversial, but as far as the concept of social entrepreneurship. But one of the things that I look back in hindsight is the company I'd started in 1999 was doing very well, and I was way ahead of the trend on that as far as digital marketing. But it didn't light me on fire, right? So I was having, it was like it was successful, but I just couldn't focus on growing it more. But one of the things I've learned being in the charitable world and being in the social enterprise world where I take in VC money is, there's business for good, but what it really is all about is there's money for good. And everything, change is fueled by money, period. So people don't like to think of it that way, but it's true. Whether it's the donors that are backing the NGOs or it's the investors that are backing the startups. And so when I look back, even though I'm really glad I went on this journey, there's not much I would change about it. I do sometimes question myself thinking if I had just stayed in the for-profit world and made a stupid amount of money, you know what I mean? Then I could have donated that, or I could have backed other startups. So I think it's important for people to know, because it seemed to me at the time that the only option was to leave the for-profit world and go either work for an NGO or a social enterprise. And I think I would like to encourage people to think, you can make money and just give it to people who are doing good. You know what I mean? There's lots of ways to do good, and money can do good, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I'm so on board with you on so many levels of that. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and new business owners, and a lot of them I will lump into just the do-gooder category. And all they're
Yeah,
like, I don't care if I make money. And as soon as I hear people say that, I'm like, well, that's not true because we all have to make
right.
money to live. It's not a free society. But you're absolutely right. Money is what moves the needle. Money is what
Yeah,
changes people's mind. I know we would have many more vegan businesses if all of a sudden all over Instagram, all we heard is just, you'll make $100,000 overnight by
right.
launching a vegan brand, right? And, we've seen the same thing in the rise of, the plant-based and vegan food
Yeah,
market. At first, people were really excited. We've seen a little backpedaling, quite recently
yeah,
because people are like, we're not making money at it. And money moves the needle. That's it,
yeah,
right? So again, I would just, advise my subversive method, be part of the change makers, get them,
yeah.
and you be the conversation maker. make the
Yeah.
company that makes the money, and then everybody will be like, oh, she was right. She was
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Let's do that too. So yeah, you're echoing my exact feelings on that. And I fully agree with it. And I hope people take that to heart that yes, you should want to make money because money is how we
Yeah.
change things.
Right. Right. Yeah. So it's hard. I mean, obviously I can respect wanting to spend your time doing good, but I think there's also just a mentality there of think about I'm doing this, or maybe, especially for people who work within an organization that in any capacity has an impact on animals. For example, like do they work for a company that has a bunch of leather chairs in all of their conference rooms, and like just different things. There's so many, or they work for a company that might be doing animal testing, and is there a way, or that might not be serving vegan options in their cafeterias? Like there's so many ways that people can make a difference right where they're at. So that's just going to share that thought.
Yeah, and I find it the same within my business where I'll start working with a company and then find out, oh, well, they also have maybe this animal side too, or animal production side of their
Yeah.
business. And then I have to weigh within myself, do I want to be a part of this business? Do I want to help them succeed? And like you, in my mind, I'm like, look, if I can show them how to make money this other way and not rely on the animal side,
Yeah.
then, I have succeeded in my mission of eradicating all animal cruelty within the world and turning everyone vegan. Like I tell everyone I meet, I'm
Right.
like, I'm actively trying to make you a vegan. I'm not even going to
Right.
like lie about it anymore. So, but okay, listen, Stephanie, you've been so awesome and I want to talk to you for hours, but I know you have to go. You're super busy. Just
Thank you.
one final thing I need to ask you, because I ask
No
all of my
problem.
guests this. For you personally, what has been a win, either personal or on the business side, for you in the last 90 days that just kind of lit you up?
Well, I mean, hands down, the closing the investor raise. I mean, that was incredible. So, because it's very, very hard right now. Like a lot of companies are going out of business. So, I mean, the fact that we were able to close we were targeting a $4 million raise. We closed over 5.5 million. So to do that during this current economic conditions is incredible. So that felt really good. Although it was so funny, like I kind of expected like the next day I was going to get to just start sleeping and like catch up on all this stuff. And instead it was just the opposite. Like more people wanted to talk, more investors wanted to know if we'd take more money. And it was good crazy, as I call it. But I was like, oh my God, I just want to sleep. But yeah, that was awesome. That felt good. It felt really good.
That is awesome. I fully agree with you. Money attracts money. So, yeah. And I think that's a great win. And again, thank you so much for spending your time and giving us all these valuable insights. It has been a joy to talk to you. And I can't wait to see where you're going to go with Uncaged
Thank you.
Innovations. So, just to be sure everyone listening knows where to find you, can you give us the website
Sure.
and just how to contact you? And, if they, I don't know, maybe there's a big brand listener, they're like, hey, we want to be a part of this. Where can they find you, Stephanie?
That'd be wonderful. So the company website is uncagedinnovations, plural.com. You can find me on LinkedIn at Stephanie Downs. And then our Instagram is also Uncaged Innovations. So please touch base.
Well, thank you so much, and you have a great day. And like I said, I can't wait to see where you land with all this.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Wow Party Podcast. If you're an entrepreneur or professional who would like to be on this podcast, please visit boomtownmarketing.com and click on podcast. We believe that every business has the potential to change the world for good, and we want to support our community to help make the world more ethical, compassionate, and sustainable for all future generations to come. And if you're looking to build your business, no matter what level you're at now, request your free marketing consultation at boomtownmarketing.com and click Get Started.